Hail cheaters! Welcome to the Always Cheating Podcast. My name is Josh. I'm here with Brandon. Brandon, how are you?
Josh, I am phenomenal. Though I feel like I like Rip Van Winkle waking up from a long slumber, rubbing my eyes, trying to figure out what's been going on during this international break. Big thanks to Sam, who filled in for you last week, Josh. It's been a while since the two of us have actually talked about what's going on with our teams, what's going on with the Premier League. Do you feel like you and I have got a lot to catch up on?
Yeah, I think the first international break is one of the tougher ones because I often really hate it. This time around, I sort of saw it in the best possible light, which was just that I've had a bad start to the season. It was a couple of weeks to reset, change my thinking a little bit. Actually, I don't know that I've ever had a bad start before, to be totally honest. I mean, I've had starts that weren't awesome. Starts where I was maybe around a million or something like that. But I'd never had a start where kind of everything didn't really click, right? Where it was just sort of a lot of 50-50s that went. You can sort of see how it can happen, right? I look at my team. There's no insane picks there. There's nothing absolutely, there's nothing crazy. If anything, I had a team that was almost exactly like a template-y kind of team. It was just kind of the pick this player, pick that player, and it didn't work out. And so because of that, I feel like my feeling is more one of like annoyance than it is of I'm not depressed or I'm not I'm not feeling I think I'm just annoyed. It's like if you I don't know. It's like if you're betting on whether a coin that you flipped in the air was going to be heads or tails, and you guessed wrong 5 times in a row or something like that, right? And I don't know how is this? How am I going to make this analogy make sense? Basically, I just feel like I was just on the wrong side of. I mean, you could call the fantasy a kind of low stakes gambling, right? You're sort of gambling on outcomes. And I think that it's just, the outcomes haven't panned out so far. And so I think the thing that actually annoys me is just like now I've got to like climb back up that hill, right? It's like I sort of, if you see the season as a long kind of march to the summit, right? Then I sort of stumbled right at the start. And now I'm kind of back basically at the foot of the hill, right? And I have to climb back up. And what I have to make sure that I don't...
You're John Wick in John Wick 4.
That's good.
At the foot of Montmartre, right? And you may climb your way all the way up the steps, and come festive fixtures, you'll be hit all the way back down.
Yeah, that's true. He does. Does he? I don't know. I don't want to give anything away. Actually, I want to spoil John Wick 4, but it still came out this year. If it was even last year, I would be okay with
that. Is the most podcast thing that may have ever been uttered on Always Cheating is I don't want to spoil John Wick 4.
That's true.
So let's just remember that.
But let's, I think the thing is to sort of wrap this up, and we can get into some actual. I mean, this is FPL talk here, but so this is my little pep talk for anybody who's had a tough start to the season. The thing is, there's a reason why athletes use we're going to take this one day at a time, one game at a time, one match at a time, right? It's everyone rolls their eyes at it. It's a total cliche, but in some ways, it's the only way you can play, right? It's literally, I just have to look at game week 5 and try to put together the best team I can. And then if that goes, no matter how that goes, I've got to look at game week 6, game week 7. Well, so if to go back to the foot of the hill analogy, what you can't do is basically like take 10 steps back and then take like a running leap and get 25 feet up in the air. You just have to just climb back up the hill, right? Like there's no like superpowers.
Charter a private blimp to just carry you up.
Exactly. There's kind of no way to do it. And so I think that, I think so for me right now, the question is, do I wildcard or do I not wildcard? And I've pretty definitively decided to wildcard. There's 2 reasons for that, maybe more actually. One is I don't like my game week 5 team. I don't like the way it looks. Doesn't look like a team that's going to work out very well for me. I don't like the start to my season. I don't want to punt on another week. Right? Like at some point you have to just accept that your team does not look the way you want it to, and you have to start making some changes. Now, what I should have done is activated that wild card a week ago and started to do it in order to get ahead of some price changes. But I just needed some more time away. And I think that I was willing to take some prices on the chin to not think about fantasy for a few days. And also, you just don't, the price changes have not been crazy the last few days. I have been following it. The international break, especially that first week, you're just not seeing too much craziness. So, and so I think that, it sort of brings me to number two. Number two is the reason to do it is, Brandon, we always talk about hashtag MFFA on this podcast, make fantasy fun again. A wild card gets you right back into peak engagement, right? If you're feeling like, my season is just not going well, it's a great time to get re-engaged. And I think the third one is I feel like when I was drawing out my team this year, last year I had this commitment. I was like, I am not going to look at a single screenshot, nothing. I'm not going to look at anybody's team that they put together going into game week 1. I don't want to see what anybody else's squad looks like. I don't want to be in any way influenced. I want to be kind of pure going into the season. And I basically held true. And I feel like it was a strategy that really worked for me. And I had a really great, I had an excellent season. I finished in the top 10K. And I feel like this year I maybe fell back into some bad habits, which is to sort of outsource some of my strategic thinking to other places, right? Pop on Twitter, see what people are saying, see what they're advocating for. Pop onto Reddit, see what people are advocating for. Listen to other podcasts, right? Just sort of like I'm not making my own decisions right now, and I just feel like that's not the way I want to play. And it's sort of like if I'm gonna keep falling down the hill this season. I don't want to mix my metaphors here. If I can keep this hill metaphor going for another minute here.
Oh yeah, let's get a special guest, Kate Bush, coming on in the second half of this
exactly, running up that hill. So that's what I want to do. I want to be running up that hill. But if I'm going to run or fall, I want to do it through my own decisions. I want it to be something that I did myself, where there's no one to blame. Right. I don't want anyone to blame. Not that I do still kind of blame Andy for leaking that Gabriel thing. Okay. And I'll get over that eventually. Okay. I really will. I promise.
I'm not sure you will. Based on current evidence, you will not. But
I think I will. I think if you give me another, like 3-4 years, I will definitely get over it. And I do think that
upon Gabriel's retirement from professional football.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, well, let's see, 8-9 years from now, I mean, most of these Chelsea players will still be under contract, right? So I think that around the time that one of those Chelsea contracts expires, I'll be over. But I do think that did put me in a kind of a sour place to start the season, right? I felt like I was immediately in the hole. I wasn't literally in a hole, but I was metaphorically in a pretty significant hole, right? Points wise.
Admittedly, this is argumentative, but if what you're saying is you need to take all outside influences away, what you're also talking about are those leaks that impacted that whole Gabriel situation.
I mean, to me, that's just like that. Those leaks are basically like edge hunting, kind of it's basically like cheating, right? And if everyone, to me, that's not, there's no strategy in that. It's just like, if everyone else is going to be cheating, I'm going to do the same thing, right? It's if we're all going to get these leads, to me, that's not exactly the same thing. I guess what I'm talking about is like, who am I going to buy? Who am I going to sell? Yeah. And a team leak is just sort of like, hey, here's what the squad's going to look like. Do with this what you will, right? Okay. The issue is when it happens 3 minutes before the deadline on an exclusive stream, right? And everyone in my mini leagues, but me apparently, was listening to that stream, and and so that to me was the slightly bigger issue. But again, I'm trying not to dwell on that, right? So the real reason I want to wildcard is I just want to reset, okay, totally. And so that's where I am right now. The theme of this week's pod is basically, if you were to wildcard right now, what would that squad look like? I think even people who aren't wildcarding, there's going to be a lot of value in it, because we're going to look ahead to teams that have good fixtures, teams that have bad fixtures, evaluate squads like Brighton, squads like Chelsea, how we feel about them, whether we want to keep and hold various players in those squads. So I think there's a lot of substance, if I do say so myself, that people will get out of this conversation. But before we get into that, Brandon, how are you feeling about your team? Like, this has been Josh's confession corner here, but how are you feeling about it? You said you doubled your rank. I didn't realize you doubled your rank in game week 4.
Yeah, I went from around 500,000 to a million through game week 4. And I am somewhere in between where our last week's guest, Sam, who is now at rank like OR 20,000 in the world.
Yeah.
I'm somewhere between him and you, where I look at my team and I don't hate it. And I feel like there are a lot of elements of the team that would survive a wild card. So I'm not close to wild carding. I have 2 free transfers. So I'm feeling solid about the direction I'm heading and the moves, the 2, maybe 3 with a -4 moves I would want to make. So on the whole, I'd say I feel empowered this season. I am not intimidated by where I am in my rank because, by virtue of doubling my rank in game week 4, I'm like, well, movement feels very easy and very fluid within the ranks at this point. So if you're one of those managers who felt like I came out of game week 4 stung and feeling kind of bad, I just don't believe it's so dire for a lot of managers. I think talking about players is going to help, and maybe you're just 1 point hit away from actually sort of like radically changing the idea of your FPL squad going into game week 5.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, I would say that it's just we're only 4 weeks in, so there's just so much time. So I mean, it's like maybe you're at the bottom of the hill or whatever, if that's how you feel, but it's not like everyone's like at the summit, right? It's like they're just a little further ahead right now. And so
those crazy rock climbing videos where the people go on days long climbs and they actually sleep suspended in air in these little like floating cots. That's kind of where I'm at right now. I feel like I'm suspended in a floating cot halfway up some sort of mountain.
Did you ever read the Everest book, the Into Thin Air by John Krakauer?
No, but I did see the film adaptation of the book, which was pretty entertaining. Jake Gyllenhaal, that's my mission in life, is to have Jake Gyllenhaal become my best friend. So if anybody out there knows Jake, let me know.
Okay, well, let you know. I think he lives in Brooklyn, Brandon, so it wouldn't be that hard. All right. So what else we missed during the international break? Not much. I mean, basically everybody played, and everybody traveled. There were a couple of handful of people who pulled out, right? I think Trent didn't play, but in general, it's like you go through all these squads and virtually everybody, went to play with their squads. And as far as I know, there's no significant injuries so far. I haven't seen anything, at least.
Correct.
One thing that's nice too is that all of the international breaks end on Tuesday, which is a big change from last year, where last year you had a lot of chaos because of World Cup qualifying, and really, I'd say really that even more than friendlies. Although you also had a lot of extra friendlies. A lot of teams were playing 2 or 3 matches, especially in the fall. And so you had a lot of international break craziness because you'd have Brazil and Argentina playing, Thursday evening. Right. And, like late in the day, because they had to squeeze 3 matches in international break. And then these players would be flying back, across the Atlantic before a Saturday AM match, right? Or the early match on Saturday or something like that. So we saw a lot of players starting at the bench because they were on international break duty. And I just don't think that's going to be a problem right now. We'll see, right? Wait for the press conferences, the old cliche. But I do think that, in general, I don't see because so many people traveled. It wasn't like one of those IBs where like it was like a pretend international break where everyone just sort of fakes an injury and right. We've seen those before, right? Rashford's got a bad toe. He better stay back for 2 weeks. It was
Udogie didn't travel because he was ill or something like that. Or Evan Ferguson. Yeah. There's all this elaborate conspiracy theory around Evan Ferguson not playing for Ireland because of a faked injury. And anyway,
Okay.
The biggest worry, I think, for a lot of fantasy managers is Julian Alvarez, who's going to be playing at La Paz in Bolivia on Tuesday. And while I agree with you, Tuesday is like for professional footballers plenty of time to get from one polar ice cap to another and be fighting fit. But Bolivia is legendary for its insane altitude and tricky playing conditions. Alvarez only played like 25 minutes in Argentina's game earlier in the IB. And this is another qualifier. So if they roll out the same starting 11, I don't think Alvarez will have more than 50 to 60 minutes that he's played before he travels back to Man City.
I am Googling whether it's possible to fly from Bolivia to England direct. Either you can go from the airport in La Paz to England. Now, it's possible they have a private jet or something like that. Yeah, because the flights I'm seeing, Brandon, we're looking at...
How much is this going to cost Julian if he flies business class?
I'm not even seeing direct. Okay, I'll tell you that. I'll tell you that right now. That's a bad sign. let me go from. I'll take away 2 stops. On there's one flight. Okay, that takes 30 hours from La Paz to Heathrow. Okay, so I think he's probably going to be picked up in some kind of private jet, right? I mean,
surely
gotta be.
Yeah, one of those transfers, right? Like the mid-flight refueling, they'll just like pass Julian Alvarez through some sort of like gas pipeline from one plane to another.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how they're gonna. Maybe he has to parachute from one to that. We'll see how it works out. But we'll hear more. Is Pep going to be back for this, or is he still recovering?
It was said that he would miss 2 matches, and those 2 matches have now come and gone. So he should, in theory, be back.
Okay, all right. Well, that's so we may hear directly from Pep himself before Saturday. Certainly, Alvarez would be a player I'd have in my wild card, and so yeah, I think that is something to watch out for. You planted a little seed. I'm glad you did, because it's good to know this stuff. But it is that I guess that would be maybe the one worry. I mean. It certainly wouldn't affect Emi Martinez, I wouldn't think.
Especially on Wildcard, though, you can't let these worries about international break travel incept you with long-term thoughts. These are like international breaks are really going to have a minimal ripple effect to one game week. So especially if you're on Wildcard, just look at what Alvarez has done through the first 4 game weeks. He's laid waste to fantasy managers who don't have him. So I think, especially in your case, Josh, if you wild card, I feel like this is not a reason to shy away from him, because unless you want to spend a transfer on him in game week 6, then we can start talking about all the anxieties around Champions League rotation a couple weeks later.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to talk more about this wildcard stuff, but I want to save that for the main part of the pod. I did want to note that there's a new double game week that's been announced for game week 7. Sort of thankfully, because I don't always like the way double game weeks drive the conversation. It's honestly about as irrelevant a double game week as you're ever going to have. You have Luton Town and Burnley playing twice. Luton Town play away to Everton, home to Burnley. Burnley play away to Newcastle and away to Luton. I suppose the Luton Town's fixtures are okay, but there's really nobody that interests me.
Luton Town themselves are not okay. Is the rejoinder there?
Yeah, and so it's. I suppose you could maybe Carlton Morris. You could maybe make a case for. He's got a goal and assist so far in the season. Maybe he's somebody that you could consider, but he's 5.5 million forward. I don't really think there's anyone else, and so maybe I don't know, one of your forwards gets injured. Maybe he's like worth a 1 week punt for game week 7 only, right? He's not somebody even on my wild card I would really be considering. So so Luton just feels like they're kind of off the table. What about Burnley? I mean, it doesn't really feel very appealing either because of that Newcastle away fixture, right?
Yeah, I think this is just a big stay away. You wouldn't expect any points from either of these teams in a single game week.
Yeah.
I mean, what the ceiling for Okay, so say Burnley are marginally better than Luton. I believe that to be true. But what I mean by that is I'm getting 1 point from a Luton player and 2 points from a Burnley player.
Yeah.
If, an extra 2 points in that game week is really important to you, fine. But I don't think the transfer is at all worth it. And then it's a transfer in. That's going to cost you a free transfer. Then, Josh, what are you going to do? You got to hold on to these guys? You got to transfer them out as well. It's 2 transfers.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I guess on a wild card you could maybe make a case for it, but
long time to wait.
Yeah, well, only 2 weeks, right? 5, 6, and 7, and so it's a couple weeks away. But and I suppose Lyle Foster, he has. I actually didn't even realize this, that he's actually scored twice already on the season. So Congrats to him. He's on a 2-match run of scoring goals, Brandon. He scored
he's in a purple patch, isn't he?
He's in a purple patch, exactly. He's only 5 million. So I suppose if I were to go with a like 3-5-2, I could consider him over Archer. I guess that would be the player that I would most likely consider there. So that is something to think about at least. I mean, Archer, I don't know. He's not going to get to play Everton every week, Brendan, but still, I mean, he's a 4.5 million player who had a goal and assist and 3 bonus points in game week 4. There's no reason for us to just wave it away, right? That's an encouraging start. That's what you want to see.
The one discouraging thing about the Burnley pickup is they're playing at Luton. And I think what we've seen more than in the last decade, in the last couple of seasons, like home fixtures really do favor the home team. And we'll see how bad Luton truly are through the rest of the season. But it being a home fixture for Luton, it's another check against Burnley for me.
Yeah, I think that's right. If Burnley were even just playing Luton at home, then maybe I would consider it. But I mean, through 3 matches, the highest scoring defender on Burnley has 2 points. Right, I think that kind of says it all. I think it's 1-1 and 0. So it's just been a tough run, and I kind of feel a little bad for Burnley in particular, because I mean they really had a great season last year, and it's been kind of a tough. I mean, they didn't get to play Luton in game week 2, which would have been a good maybe opportunity for them to pick up an early victory. I mean, I suppose you could say the same for Luton, but having to play Spurs, Villa, and Man City in their first 3 matches, those are all 3 really strong teams, and it's just it makes for a pretty tough start. So I feel like I just have, and I think the problem there, and I guess this does get to game week 7, is because they've had this tough start and they haven't really acquitted themselves super well. It's hard to have a read on anybody, right? Like who? I just can't sit here and advocate for anybody. There's just not a single player that I find appealing on either squad, honestly.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. Is if you can't like in your mind imagine how these FPL points are going to come, like truly visualize them. That's a first red flag for any move you want to make.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're a bit of a Sander Berge head, but like I can't get there with you, Brandon.
Hey, Berge was rumored to go to Fulham over the summer. He's one of those players who will largely be talked about and never seen. But I think Burnley
there's a lot
are
of fun. I was just a quickly side note here. Go. There are a lot of fun that guy on this Burnley squad, right? You guys remember Goodmanson? He's always fun.
Sure, yes.
Burge, Nathan Redmond. Did you know that Nathan Redmond was playing for Burnley now?
I did know that. Yeah, he was a late transfer to Burnley, and there was. When Burnley played Man City, there was a great shot of, you remember when Redmond was at Southampton and Pep sort of like walked him off the pitch, basically. It looked like he was saying, you were the best player out there. Like, you come play with me.
Yes. Yeah.
And how far Redmond has fallen since then.
It's tough. It's Jack Cork. Remember Jack Cork? He's playing for Burnley now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
How about this? Aaron Ramsey. Did you know that Aaron Ramsey was playing for Burnley? Arsenal's Aaron Ramsey. Yes. Yeah, Arsenal's Aaron Ramsey is on Burnley. I kid you not.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. Great. That's great for him. Jay Rodriguez, I did know because he came on the pitch in a recent match. And our old buddy Dara O'Shea, Brandon, who we had a Patreon supporter once named Dara O'Shea, and I would like to think that it was that Dara O'Shea. And I think the fact that we called him out on the podcast and said that this might be the Burnley player probably got him to cancel his Patreon membership. But I hope he's still out there. I hope he's still playing fantasy. Dara, even if it was a different Dara O'Shea, maybe that's a very common name.
I think we've got a different Aaron Ramsey too, who says here on the internet machine that the Aaron Ramsey is playing for Cardiff, and we've got young Aaron Ramsey, who is just 20 years old. Yeah. Young Ramsey.
Oh, there's another Ramsey. That's really too bad. I was really hoping that Aaron Ramsey was just playing incredibly anonymously for
This is the
Burnley.
problem when you don't get your profile updated in the FPL game. It's just a blank kit there on the Aaron Ramsey's page.
I thought maybe it was like a September transfer deadline move or something like that.
Well, it's Nathan Redmond. Why not?
Yeah, no, but I'm looking now, and this Aaron Ramsey is definitely not the other Aaron Ramsey. Well, that has nothing to do with fantasy, anyways. Brandon, let's move on here. One quick note before we get into the wild card talk. Please become a Patreon supporter. Join us. Your Patreon support helps us to keep doing 2 podcasts each week. One that we record every Sunday night, and one that we record exclusively for our Patreon supporters. I did one last week that it's still available, still relevant. Brandon, it's one of my infamous Josh Landon's Odyssey of the Mind podcast, where I go on kind of I light a little incense and do a little freewheeling jazz exploration. Cool. It gets pretty wild, pretty scronky.
It's like a cosmic gumbo of a podcast. It is.
It's like a cosmic gumbo of a podcast. That's apt. The way you've said that. So we do, but usually we do them together. But then you and I also like to, and we have guests on for those pods as well. We do have several guests on already so far this season. So you can go to patreon.com/alwayscheating to support the pod. As I mentioned, you get the extra podcast each week. You can talk with us and others on the Discord. Lots of other Discord channels there as well. There's sort of one for each nation, which is kind of fun. And you can also plan meetups in New York City, and there's also TV and music and all sorts of other random Discord threads on there as well. So become part of that community. And thank you to our newest patrons, Nick Day and Chris G. Thank you to you too. And it's always nice to get patrons over the international break, Brandon, because that tends to be a pretty quiet time. So once again, it's early in the month still too. So it's a nice, good time to start with Patreon support. So go to patreon.com/alwayscheating once again to support the podcast.
All right, Josh, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk more about where you're at with this potential wild card.
Let's do it.
There's no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform that you need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed's a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. One of the things I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring all in one place so easy because Indeed does the hard work for you. They show you the candidates whose resumes on Indeed fit your description immediately after you post so you can hire faster. Join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/Blue Wire Sports. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/Blue Wire Sports. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire Sports, and support the show by saying that you heard it on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire Sports. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
NFL Sunday Ticket is now on YouTube and YouTube TV, which means that you can stay close to your team even if you don't live in their town. Like, maybe you're a Raven who married a Seahawk who got a job in the land of the Falcons. With NFL Sunday Ticket, you can watch your team's out-of-market Sunday afternoon games no matter where you live, because you shouldn't have to change teams even if you change towns. NFL Sunday Ticket, now on YouTube and YouTube TV. Go to youtube.com/presale to get $50 off.
Terms and embargoes apply. Offer ends 9/19. No refund. Subscription auto renews.
Between the kids being home and hosting, everything in our house gets used up in summer. With Instacart, I can save money by stocking up on all my favorite summer brands. I save time by getting everything delivered in as fast as an hour. And I save myself a sink full of dirty dishes by stocking up on paper plates for the annual summer cookout. Save more on summer essentials? Spend more time enjoying summer. Add summer to cart. Download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by FX's Welcome to Wrexham. Celebrity owners Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds' small-town Welsh football club is fighting for a chance at promotion. These 2 Hollywood stars lead a team in the midst of history in the making, while dedicated staff and supporters hold on to a dream of returning the team and this working-class town in Wales to glory. FX's Welcome to Wrexham premieres September 12th on FX. Stream on Hulu.
All right, Brandon, we're back. So we've talked big picture about the wild card and when do you know it's time to wild card? It's sort of different for everybody, but for me, it's a combination of what does the game week look like right in front of me. If the team looks good enough, I would say if it looks quite good, like if I feel reasonably happy with what's there, I will not typically wild card. Like I don't want to wild card just because it seems in theory like the right thing to do, right? Like even if I don't love my team, if I sort of look at it and it looks okay, then I usually will not. But in this case, feels like it's the time feels right. So a question from Shiv, longtime supporter of the pod, Shiv, former guest on the pod, in fact. He said, what 5 to 6 players are essential on your wild card? So we're looking sort of broadly at, I don't think it's useful. Maybe you can do this for goalkeepers if you want, but I think in general, even on a wild card, I would not be looking more than 5 fixtures ahead, 6 fixtures ahead. I just don't think it ever works out the way you plan, right? If you're like, oh, I'm going to have this player because the next 2 are great, and then they have a poor one, and then they have 2 good ones, and then 3 poor ones, and I'm going to rotate these 2 every week, and something's going to go wrong, right? You're going to have some injuries. So I don't think looking more than like 4 or 5 weeks ahead is really the way to do it. And plus, we'll have another national break, right? We're going to have, the next 4 weeks just gets you through game week 8, basically. So it's important to keep that in mind, too, because we could see more chaos down the line. So I guess that would be another reason to possibly hold off on an international break or on a wild card, is if you think, well, maybe I just make it to the next 4 weeks. Like I like my team enough to get to the next. It sounds like maybe that's where you are right now, Brendan. I like my team enough to get to the next 4 weeks, and then maybe I'll decide then. Just for anyone who doesn't know, you get 2 wild cards each season. One needs to be used in the first 19 weeks of the season, and the other one needs to be used in the second 19 weeks. So you want to I don't know, just make sure you use it before the festive fixtures are over, basically.
Use it or lose it.
Use it or lose it. Yeah.
There is a trap mentally you can get into of, well, I'm not going to wild card until I feel like I have more answers to my questions, until I feel like the narrative around certain players is complete. And then that can end up biting you because you're actually not paying attention. The story is being written right in front of you, and you're just not acting fast enough. To Shiv's question about who would be a necessity on a wild card, it's Spurs. You're looking directly at Spurs because it has been amazing how quickly the Postecoglou story has already been confirmed as written and true, and that this team is working. The James Maddison transfer has worked for Spurs. Son is Son is definitely somebody we should talk more about. But that's my first stop on a wild card, is the Spurs aisle of the supermarket.
Same. I think that they haven't risen enough in price yet. That feels like a big miss for me. And I hate to be a 1 week merchant like this, right? Because I did opt for Sterling over Madison. I felt pretty strongly about it, to be honest, too. I didn't really debate it, but I think just Madison scoring that outside the box goal, and I just feel like maybe I haven't given him kind of full credit so far for how good he's looked, how well he's played so far this season. And he's got 2 goals and 2 assists. And I think sometimes a wild card, part of the appeal of it is you can get a great fixture to kick things off, right? And Spurs play Sheffield United at home in game week 5. The run after that is not, well, the next 2, I would say, aren't as good. They play away to Arsenal. They host Liverpool. Hosting Liverpool, to me, though, is fine from an attacking standpoint. It's kind of hard to imagine Liverpool not conceding a goal or 2, right? So I wouldn't be too worried about that one. Man United away, I don't know. Would you consider resting Matt? It kind of depends on your team, I realize, but would you rest someone like Madison for Arsenal away, not Man United away, excuse me, for the North London derby?
No, I don't think so. So I guess like Gabriel is my way into the conversation about how I think Arsenal's defense has not proven to be very good, and then they have some injury and rotational concerns, and this goalkeeper drama that is not really played out yet. I have no expectations for that Arsenal team, and the mandate will be from the home team. Let's score some goals. And I think that opens the door for a high pressing, all action Ange team to score goals of their own. So no, there's no way I would rest Madison in that match. Yeah.
And we should talk about Arsenal, but we'll just to stay in Spurs for a second here. So you have Udogie, who is still only up to 4.7, which isn't that bad, all things considered. Considering how well he's played start of the season, already has 2 assists on the season, and I think it's 2 clean sheets actually. 2 clean sheets so far in the season. So really strong start for Udogie. it looks like, I mean, Spurs just really have impressed so far at the start of the season, and to get what seems like a top 6 team, if nothing else, to get a starting fullback for that squad for under $5 million still feels like a really good price. I think sometimes the thing you have to avoid, and maybe it's a little easier than a wild card than it is with the transfer, is once a player starts to rise a little bit in price, you're like, I missed my chance. Like I missed my window.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of it's not gonna, all the fun is gone now. It's sort of like what's the fun of having this player, and everyone's kind of jumped on the bandwagon. But it's only 13.8% owned in fantasy, right? I mean, we live in a world where Holland is at like 96.2% or something like that. So I think that 13.8 is significantly. His ownership is quite low still, right? And so I think that he's definitely one to consider. And even Madison isn't that high. I mean, he's at 26%, right? So again, if you're having a bad start and you're wild carding, let's say you're 3 million overall, then if you can bring it, I mean, the 26% makes a big difference, right? We're not talking about at this point, you don't have to care about I myself do not have to care about effective ownership in the top 10K or whatever, right? All I have to care about is the ownership in the band of players in my rank. And so if 75% of
one at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So, if 75% of the managers don't have a player who's performing as well as Madison, and they play Sheffield United at home. And I mean, granted, all these players could be had with one transfer, maybe 2 if you've saved them up. But I think for me, it's the fact that I can kind of go through my squad and think, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, all of these different all of these different players, many of whom I like, someone like Matoma, right? I like Matoma. I think he's had a really, scored maybe the goal to start the season. Certainly one of the 2 or 3 best goals so far this season. Picked up an assist in the Newcastle match. He's an excellent player. I just really like Matoma, but he doesn't have a great run of fixtures, and there's a lot of competition in those midfield spots. So I can kind of solve a little bit of a problem there by using a wild card, and I can also figure out what to do with my forward line, and I can figure out what to do with my defenders. And so I agree. I think that Spurs are where it starts. I think the other player to at least consider would be Son. And the reason that Son would be considered is because he is at least temporarily playing as a forward in this kind of new formation, right? They're sort of, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just because Richarlison at the start of the season has not covered himself in glory, right?
I think that's the sole reason why. Yeah.
But do we think that'll change? I mean, Richarlison basically was complaining after, was it game week 2 or game week 3, that it wasn't his fault that he doesn't score goals for Spurs. It's like everyone else's fault. It wasn't like a great, I mean, I'm sure he's just very frustrated, but there's just no reason for me to think, oh yeah, Son he literally just scored a hat trick, right? So it's hard for me to think, oh yeah, they're going to bail on this Son experiment right away. It's not going to last.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many caveats with it. It's one match. It's a very convincing match. However, that convincing match was against Burnley, which we have already taken them down a few pegs at the start of this pod. And prior to this hat trick from Son, everyone was just kind of like, well, we're back to old, doesn't work as a fantasy asset Son.
He did score a hat trick though.
Well, so
it counts.
So he came up. All those points count, and if you got those points, you get to keep those points. Brandon, cannot take them away from you. It's true.
Yeah, but he is playing Sheffield next. I mean, so it is so you could just have him for a week and then move him to someone else. I don't know.
This is true.
Yeah,
this is true.
Yeah. So
this is true. I don't want to rain on that parade, and I will certainly be jealous of managers who have Son going into game week 5. I don't know. I guess the theme of my season so far is I'm scrambling for more to be more convinced on a lot of these players. And you remember Son scored a hat trick against Leicester last season, coming off the bench.
That's true.
It didn't really kickstart anything for him.
That is true. That is true. So Son is at least on the table. The thing is, Madison has risen so much in price that he is now at 7.8 million. Son's at 9.1. I mean, the price difference is actually kind of close. And so it's like it's at least, I feel like in years past, it would have been much more extreme, right? Like, one's 10 and one's 7. Well, 3 million is so much, right? But 1 million is enough that you're like, well, maybe I just take the punt on Son, and that might be worth considering.
I think that from the fantasy game, there are two arguments to make between Maddison and Spurs. Maddison is basically the de facto star man of the team now. He is, even with Son getting awarded the captaincy by the club over the summer, it's somehow James Maddison has come in and now he is the central force of that team.
Yeah.
Is that going to be better for your fantasy team than Son, who will most often be playing farther forward?
Yeah.
Maddison's going to be involved in everything, full stop.
Yeah.
Is Son going to be enough involved in all the goals that he will blow Maddison out of the water? That definitely could happen, but at this point we don't know.
It's true.
I kind of lean toward Maddison in that for that reason.
And it does feel a little excessive to have both of them, but maybe that is worth considering. Maybe you do it for 1 week. Right, maybe that's the eventual wildcard. You try it for 1 week, and then you pick the one you like more to go with moving forward.
Right. The advantage of Son's price is that you can move him to virtually anyone now.
Okay, so lots of options on Spurs. I think Man City is an interesting case, right? You could make a strong case for having 3 Man City players, and it almost doesn't matter who you pick, despite the fact that they concede 1 goal and 1 shot in every match. Their defensive stats are by far the best of anybody in the Premier League. So it's that like perennial question, like what am I supposed to do with these Man City defenders that have no attacking potential at all? Even guys who have some appeal, like Vardiol, kind of instantly rotation risks, right? Mm-hmm. So then what do I spend $6 million on Diaz, who offers nothing, and I'm most likely just going to get 2 points every week because they're going to have one shot where they concede a goal. So I don't know. My feeling now is to get Alvarez. Obviously Haaland. I mean, Haaland doesn't even count at this point. You should actually just be able to get 4 Man City players because Haaland. It's. But I think the question would be Foden or a defender, and I suppose Foden, I have to admit, is still a little lower for me than I don't know why. Maybe it's like a Maddison thing where I just can't quite get there with him. But
I didn't think Foden had a particularly strong match against Fulham in game week 4, especially when you compare it to his man of the match performance against Newcastle. So he remains kind of a man of mystery. And I think at their strongest, the Haaland-Foden combination early last season didn't involve Alvarez. Yeah. And now Alvarez being in the mix, I think changes that calculations. I think it's Haaland, Alvarez, and Foden misses out by virtue of all these other options that we're talking about. We haven't even gotten to the likes of Liverpool. Yeah. Yeah. I'd rather have, I'd definitely rather have Maddison than Foden. Yeah. Would I rather have Son than Foden? I don't know.
Would you rather have Saka than Foden?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so too. And Arsenal's fixtures are actually, well, they're okay. They're the Everton away, great fixture. Spurs at home, fine. Like it's from an attacking standpoint, it's fine. Bournemouth away in game week 7, sure, good. You can expect some goals there. Then Man City and Chelsea in 8 and 9. So I would probably on a wild card hold Saka for 3 more weeks and then decide from there. I still think it's really tricky to ID defenders that have a lot of appeal. I think you could maybe, I don't know. It's like Newcastle, I suppose. They have to be up there. It's hard to get past just how much Brighton kind of wrecked them. Right. It's just like I have to kind of shake that off still a little bit. But I think that they certainly hold some appeal. And I don't know. It's just tricky. I mean, and do we think that the Liverpool, those 2 goals that they scored, was that just a total smash and grab? And should we not kind of factor that in too much? It was, but it's all part of the match, right? Just because it happened late doesn't mean that it's like a fluke necessarily, right? And so. And then it's just that's how you have a bench and you use it. You bring on players who can do a job, and that's what Darwin did. So I think Newcastle would certainly be one of the squads I would be targeting with defenders that I would consider. Brentford, decent, like kind of up and down fixtures. Again, I'm just looking at the next 5 or 6. I think that if you look too far ahead, it doesn't really make a lot of practical sense, because that's 5 or 6 fixtures ahead. That's 5 or 6 additional transfers too, right? It's not like you just have to, you will be able to continue to improve your team as the weeks go on. And so there's kind of no point in me being like, oh, I'm looking 11 weeks ahead, and if I get this defender now, he's going to be great to fill in for me when these other players aren't. I just don't think it works that way. There's just too many players will get injured, too much chaos will happen in order for that kind of strategy to work. You can really only play the next few game weeks even with a wild card.
I think maybe managers will be splitting hairs with defenders, because game week to game week we're seeing 2 to 3 of 20 clubs getting clean sheets. I think on Wildcard in particular, I would look toward the quote unquote better teams. You can get any Man City defender for roughly $5 million. I do think that's a steal, and while they'll often be disappointing, I think the fact that we seem to have a third City spot just to play around with, why not a defender? Because you don't necessarily. I mean, the fact that we're already sort of thinking about dumping Chilwell basically means there are no defenders apart from
kind of forgot about him.
Worth happening anymore.
So that's like how whatever they've been. It's like I just sort of was like, oh right, Chilwell. Like I should figure out what I'm going to do there.
Yeah. So I think Newcastle, I'm not really bothered to have the argument of, is Trippier worth it? I vote no. I would go Botman and probably Diaz on a wild card.
Yeah, I think
because I can.
Yeah, I think that I would certainly consider Schär, who's a little more expensive than Botman. He's $5 million, but I do think he's got a little more attacking threat. I mean, he certainly does. I think have more attacking threat, and so I mean, it's not massive. We're not talking about last year I felt like he was this great attacking pick for Newcastle, but he only had 1 goal and 3 assists. But the fact that he's on these set, I felt like he hit the bar like 4 times last year.
He's a Marcus Alonso type. He gets the opportunities.
Yeah, he had 1 goal on 4.6 XG last season. Jesus. So he actually really did kind of underperform a little bit. And his X goals assists or his XA, so how many expected assists was 2. So that's an expected X goal involvement of almost 7, which is pretty high for a central defender. Yeah. It's so I think that Schär is up there. I mean, and whereas Botman is just he's injured right now anyway, right? So there's just like he might be back after the national break, but it's too risky. I did want to quickly just say on Alvarez, by the way, because I had been looking at this earlier, just the slight worry about when Kevin De Bruyne comes back, whether that's going to be something we should be worried about in terms of Alvarez, because Alvarez in some ways is playing. I mean, they kind of both are, he and Foden, but he certainly. When I would think that when KDB comes back, it will limit Alvarez's minutes to a degree. But what I was seeing today was that it looks like KDB may not actually be back until like the new year. So it's a long way off. And so I think that means if you can get an attacking mid for under $7 million from Man City, who's going to be playing most of the fixtures, and you just shouldn't avoid a Man City player because you might miss one match because of a Champions League, right? Like that's because that could apply to any of them, including Haaland, right? You could just lose somebody for 1 week to the Champions League, and you're not going to know which one it is because Pep isn't going to tell you, right? And so I just think that it's certainly not. So I think that's worth thinking about at least. Is that you really do have a more safety with Alvarez than you might have thought going into this season.
Now you got a note here about Crystal Palace. I wonder. The fixtures are fine enough. Villa, Fulham, Manchester United, NFO. I'm not sold on this Palace team. I'll tell you what, buddy.
Well, it's more like rotating some 4.5s. That's kind of what I was thinking here, right? Like, do I just try to like mix and match a little bit? Just try to get 3 players out there.
I've got Pau Torres in my team, so it's not like I'm over here with a bulletproof argument for all 4.5 defenders. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about a couple. I don't want to get too on the Palace thing either, because I wouldn't consider any of their mids. I wouldn't consider any of their forwards. I wouldn't even consider Johnstone now because I think it's too risky. So it would really just be, do I want Gahey as a rotating fourth or fifth defender? It doesn't feel like good pod content. So I think we should just keep going here. But I think the two squads that I think are tricky, we talked about Brighton a little bit, but I think Matoma can go because there are some other players that just have better fixtures, honestly. Estupiñán to me is too good to drop. And so he's in my squad. And I think that I'm just going to keep him through thick and thin. And also, I mean, Brighton play Bournemouth at home in game week 6. That should be an excellent fixture for him too. So I just don't see, I think maybe I was a little like overly gung ho about like, he's the new Trent. Like he's undra, like, you have to start him in every fixture. I don't feel as strongly about that. I think that, but I do think that I'm just going to ride out this kind of rough run of matches with him. And, but I do long term, I still a huge believer in Estupiñán. I really want him in my squad. And again, I think his price is great too, right? It's not going to, we're not talking about, even if he is doing great kind of Trent levels of attacking returns, he's not doing it at 8 million. He's doing it at 5. And so I can just find a squat. I can find a spot for him in my squad at 5 million. I think Chelsea is the interesting one, right? We've got Nicholas Jackson. We've got Ben Chilwell, Raheem Sterling. What do you think? I mean, if you were on a wild card right now, and just to set the scene even further, they have a terrific run of fixtures too. Bournemouth.
They've had a terrific run of fixtures.
They've had. So Bournemouth, Villa, Fulham, Burnley in the next 4. 3 of those 4 are away. So the question is, do we see clean sheets in any of those 4 matches? I mean, I kind of expect Bournemouth to score. I think Villa's got a really good chance of scoring. Fulham away, I think that could be a tricky fixture. West London derby. Burnley away, maybe that's the one that you could see a clean sheet there. But it's hard for me to even get excited about Sanchez as a goalkeeper. I mean, he's on my radar a little bit, but I think that I think ultimately I wouldn't opt for him. I think that it's I don't know, and so I'm actually kind of considering the Leno Areola double, Brandon. But let's table that for 1 second here. What do you think about Jackson? Let's start with him. What are your thoughts on Nicholas Jackson?
That's a big no for me, dog. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
he is not him. I think is the answer to that question. Broadly speaking, my issue with Chelsea is they looked really enticing in game week 1 when they had that performance against Liverpool and Enzo Fernandez, Conor Gallagher. It's like an incredible midfield duo. Caicedo has come in, and it's clearly going to take him a while to get the butterflies out of his stomach. He'll surely come good. It's a matter of time. Yeah. I would not say the same thing about Nicholas Jackson. It's like you can certainly argue that he's proven himself elsewhere on planet Earth, and maybe it's going to take him time to bed in. But have you seen him do one single thing on the pitch? Usually when that happens, a player is going to come good. You've seen them do one thing where you're like, there it is. There it is. He's
had like a couple nice passes. I mean, I that miss was such a killer for me. The Raheem Sterling ball it was like easier to score than miss. Sure. Right. That one was just such a killer. And it's important to note that that's a great chance too. So when you get mad about your game week, it's important to remember that like most of the time it's going to work out well. But I agree. He doesn't feel like he's him. I think he is this year's player who got thrown into a tough spot. Like it's not. I think that with Timo Werner was brought in to be the guy, right? He had sort of done amazing things in the Bundesliga. He played extremely well. It kind of felt like the right time for him to make the big move, but he was brought in to be the man, right? And it didn't work out. He got pretty unlucky at times, and then at some point it became kind of comical how much it was not working out for him. But I think with Jackson, he wasn't brought in to be that guy, right? At least not initially. I mean, it's not like he wasn't 100 million.
And Kuku was brought in to be the guy.
Exactly. Yeah. And Jackson was going to be more of a long-term starter for sure. But I'm not even sure he was like, and he had a good offseason and stuff like that. But it was not supposed to be kind of him leading the line and soaking up so much pressure. And so I don't want to like totally kill him, right? Because it does feel like he's had some bad luck. But I have to admit, it's just I'm not really planning to keep him on my wild card. I don't feel hugely enthusiastic about it. I agree. It's a nice pass here and there, a couple decent shots. And again, this is where on my wild card, I'm not gonna do the Twitter thing. And I just like, it's like, I just am so sick of players not performing well. And then everyone explaining to me why it doesn't matter, because the underlying stats are so terrific that we should all be like lining up to captain him this week. Right. And It's just like, are you watching these matches? Like, give me a break. Right. It's just, sometimes it gets a little frustrating. That kind of narrative.
The addition of Cole Palmer at Chelsea too is I could see Cole Palmer maybe being more on the right and him playing with Nicholas Jackson.
Yeah.
But given Jackson's form, I wouldn't be surprised if Jackson started from the bench at some point in the next few weeks if this keeps going the way it is.
I think that's right. It's clearly there's a confidence issue now too, right? I thought maybe the goal in Game Week 3 would solve it, but it doesn't seem like it has. So I think, what about Man United? Where do
this is my big question, because I am looking to spend some transfers, and I'm looking to do it in my midfield because my midfield's gone a little stale with Foden, Bruno Fernandes, Rashford, and Saka. And then Spurs, Pape Sarr on my bench. Who makes way for James Maddison is the great question. We talked a little bit about Foden, how maybe he's not, there's a high ceiling for Foden for sure, but he's not really hitting it fantasy-wise so far. So Foden to James Maddison feels pretty simple, but I still have then that triple. So I think for the purposes of this conversation, who do I choose to drop between Bruno and Rashford? And again, I'm like obsessed with this idea of and I think it's silly to think that Højlund will come in and totally transform.
I think so. Yes,
what we get fantasy wise. He's too young. He's too new to this
coming off an
system.
Injury. It's I agree.
He did get some minutes off the bench for Denmark this weekend, so he's still out there getting minutes in his legs. But I think I'm kind of leaning towards getting rid of Bruno right now, just because of the whole placement on the pitch sort of a thing. Bruno's been playing a little deeper, and Rashford, if anyone's going to come good and score some goals, it's going to be him. But then you're getting rid of the penalty possibility output from Bruno. There is the argument there. So it's like a 50-50 coin flip there. But who would you dump between Bruno and Rashford?
Yeah, I mean,
I assume you wouldn't have either on your wild.
I don't know. I actually think I might hold on to Bruno. I think it's tricky. I think that Bruno is the one. I think the question for me is whether I hold on to Sterling, right? And that may kind of determine. I mean, there are quite a number of midfield options that are appealing, right? I think going in 5 through the middle on a wild card is, or even not on a wild card, is what makes kind of the most sense right now, because there's so many good picks. And I think, I'd still have a pretty solid run of fixtures. Their next 5 are all quite good, to be honest. And so I think I might hold Bruno. I don't know. I mean, it was so frustrating when Rashford scored away to Arsenal, and I was like, I was so gung ho about Rashford made my team sheet before Bruno did to go into the season, and it's like, and now I feel like I'm suddenly like in a Salah Mane situation from a few years ago, where it's like, I feel like no matter which one I pick, it's going to be, it's, I just need to have both, but then having both can be so frustrating. So I probably hold on to Bruno. Maybe only because he's still like 0.5 million. I actually think he dropped in price again, so he's like 0.6 million cheaper than Rashford. And so I think that's where I'm leaning right now. Is that right? I think that's where we are, right?
He's 8.4. Yeah.
Rashford's 9.
Yeah.
Oh, Rashford's 8.9 too. They both dropped.
Okay. Yeah. I actually have the prices changed in the midst of us recording. So, okay. Bruno's still 8.4. Yeah. This is old news, but I think a wild card, I don't know. Manchester United they've been a dog of a team so far.
It's true. defense is a mess right now with all the injuries. I don't know. I have to give a little more thought to the Bruno thing. I'm still, I guess I'm still like a little bit of a believer in the attack. I would say I'm not really factoring in the forward situation too much. I'm kind of like you. I mean, will Højlund even start the next week? It's hard to say, right?
Who knows?
It's like, yeah,
who knows? Well, why are we spending so much time talking about Chelsea and Manchester United when we've got Liverpool, who are actually winning games, scoring goals, playing fun football, have guys like coming back from injury as opposed to leaving by way of injury?
Well, you tell me then, who would I pick on Liverpool? Like name literally one player that you would have. Like, do you rearrange your entire team, like bend time and space to find a way to get Salah in?
Like you're shooting a gun in the hit movie Wanted?
Yeah, exactly. Because if you don't do that, I would be curious who is actually worth having, right? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, Diaz, I guess he's blanked the last two. He's a rotation risk. Darwin, he started one match, and it's like, will he start another one? I have no idea. I guess I'd be more interested in him, but again, it's like, oh my God, the idea of having Darwin and going through that stress every week, yeah, Gakpo's off the table. The entire defense, in my opinion, is off the table. I mean, Trent, I know he's like flagged or whatever. He'll be fine, I'm sure. But I think, you do have, is Van Dijk?
He's suspended.
He's still suspended. Okay. Because of his...
He got an extension because he's just out there on the streets, saying refs' names and whatnot.
Yeah, that's true. He went too hard. Yeah. So, as long as Van Dijk's there, that defense on the table. So there's really nobody. I think Jota has come up the bench the last two matches. I'm not going to bring in a bench player on my wild card. I'm not going to get Sposley. So it's only Salah. And I don't know. I look at all these players that are interesting to me, and not really. No.
This is Josh getting back to basics, back to his core principles. And Mo Salah, you've had some good times.
It's just not practical to me. It's not. I don't know. I mean, he's not even doing that well. I mean, he's doing fine, like 2 goals and 2 assists. Well, James Maddison has 2 goals and 2 assists at $5 million fewer dollars, $5 million fewer fantasy bucks.
What was funny about the Salah goal from game week 4 was it was at the back post, I think off a set piece or something like that.
It was.
And it was like every goal that Harry Kane was scoring at the start of last season, where we were like, this is beyond belief. There's no way Kane is going to keep this up. The Spurs team is not great. They're underperforming. I'm not getting Kane into my fantasy team. What did we talk about at the end of last season? Why didn't we have Kane this entire time? Blah, 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 blah. I wonder if it's somebody trying to communicate something to us that Mo Salah scored a at the back post Harry Kane-esque goal. That was sort of like a wink, wink.
For you,
get this dude.
Yeah. All right. For you, I will try a wild card draft that has Mo Salah in it to see if I can make it work. Maybe it's possible. I don't know. Maybe it's possible. I've still got Ollie Watkins. I think he's got to go.
Certainly.
Yeah. They, of course, somehow Villa have like not a single bad fixture. So I guess they did play away to Liverpool and Newcastle, but it's I'm just not feeling it with Watkins. His instincts just continue to be not like to pass it, right? He's just Correct. Like he's got this. It's like they almost need a forward to play with him. It's not, I don't know. It's weird.
He seems very isolated when he receives the ball up top, and he's not comfortable with knowing where his teammates are. Are they coming? Is Diaby here, there? Is he shooting? Am I passing? What's going on? Yeah. So I agree. Yeah. I don't know if I have the guts to. I don't know if I have the guts. Of course, I have the guts, Josh. I don't know if I'm going to get rid of him.
Not before the
Palace match.
No, and Palace's defense is okay, but I think I agree. I would probably just keep him for that match. That does not feel like, given what you've already talked about, so things you want to do. I'm curious what Brighton. I mean, just because you were talking about maybe dropping some Man United players, I am curious what version of Brighton we see for this match. I mean, they've a crazy 2-week run for them, right? Where they. I don't know. So I think that they could really just absolutely take it to, I don't know. The West Ham match, maybe that was just West Ham was just the right, like Brighton was the right matchup for them, right? Like West Ham just was sort of the way that their counterattacking style operates. It was like they just had a great game plan, and I don't mean this to disparage West Ham in any way, but it was just like they just really executed perfectly. I mean, because outside of that match, we've got Brighton winning every other match they played by multiple goals, right? They beat Luton 4-1. They beat Wolves 4-1. They beat Newcastle 3-1. A match where I think many people thought Newcastle might win that one, right? And so it was just this kind of West Ham match where they were really pretty dominant for most of that match too. They really were quite in control, and they just kind of kept getting hit on the break, which of course exposed a real flaw in their team. But still, to be on 3 wins and through 4 is pretty impressive.
Estupiñán played 90 against Argentina for Ecuador in a World Cup qualifier. I can't believe they're already playing World Cup qualifiers in common ball. Yeah. And they play on Tuesday against Uruguay. And you would expect Estupiñán to play 90 again there.
It's a qualifier.
Just putting that information out into the universe.
Yeah. I think I will be keeping Estupiñán. I will go on the record and say that right now. I don't plan to start him, though, in game week 5, unless, I don't know. I mean, just looking at my squad right now, it's like the hilarious thing is you can make an argument for just keeping Gabriel now, which I will not be doing, but it's you can at least make a case for it.
Do it for the content.
It would be hilarious. I mean, he's down to 4.8. It's like such an absolute disaster. But I mean, what about Saliba? Did you drop Saliba? I can't remember.
Yeah, I moved Saliba to you doggy last week.
That's right.
So
that's a good move.
That panned out nicely.
Easily.
Yeah, I think Arsenal defense, there's no value there, I guess you could say.
Yeah. All right. Oh, and then one final question here, which if Nick Stilling says, with Pickford such a liability, he's speaking my language. It says, one of the other reasons I want a wild card, what goalkeeper options make the most sense going forward? So there's a handful, right? You have the 2, I think at this point we should only say the 1 4 million, right? I think Areola is the 4 million player that we think will definitely play. I think Matt Turner has to be at risk, right? I think we have to, there's at least enough risk there that if you were to wild card, you would not have Matt Turner. I think it's too risky.
Yeah, and his value will plummet the moment he stops starting for Forest. So that's, I mean, whatever, as much as that matters to you or doesn't, I don't think it's that big of a deal, but to flag it. But yeah, I think if you wild card, Areola is 100% in your team, and then it's a question of your further appetite. Yeah. I think I'm pretty convinced, just given my experience with Onana, that there's still no case to be made. I'm still hunting for this case, Josh. To make it worthwhile to pay more than 4.5 for a starting goalkeeper. So now we're talking about Leno, Flecken.
Fulham got crushed. They've had a really terrible defensive start at the season. It's not always a bad thing for a goalkeeper because it does mean they get a lot of saves. I mean, Leno's actually done fine in fantasy this season, outside of the Man City match. Even in the Arsenal match, that was a 2-2 draw. He ended up with 5 points in that match. Got 12 in game week. I mean, they have actually kept a clean sheet so far this season, which is more than you can say of many other squads in the Premier League. So, I mean, is it going to turn around for Fulham? Like this really rough. I mean, they weren't that bad defensively last year. It feels a little fluky that they've been this poor to start the season.
Yeah, I think it comes down to Palhinha. So Palhinha, their star midfielder, was kind of like a will he, won't he leave. He went to Bayern. He went to Munich to actually had photos taken of him in the kit, and the transfer just didn't go through. So then following that, he doesn't play. He's not even on the bench against Man City. And presumably the manager just says, hey man, that was wild. Maybe you should just like step away for this match.
He might not have been able to get a flight back, right? It's like, who knows? Like,
So I think so long as his temperament, his emotional state is okay and he comes back ready to be a professional, which there's no reason to think he wouldn't be, I think Fulham come back and they're able to at least have more structure than they did against City.
Yeah.
So that gives me more confidence with the Leno pick. Long story short, is if Palhinha is back and that works, I have, who cares about Fulham's attack? No one's getting fantasy Fulham for goals. Not happening.
Yeah.
So I think it's all about Palhinha's ripple effect looking backward to Leno.
I think
on Wildcard, I think I'd get him and Areola.
Yeah, I think Johnstone would have been a player I really would have considered, but I think that the Dean Henderson thing makes me a little worried. And going Turner and Areola feels a little too risky. Also, West Ham, it's just like, again, it's just not fun to go into a wild card and have just be starting Areola straight up for Man City and Liverpool back to back in the first two fixtures.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What's the deal with Dean Henderson? I mean, this guy's been the second coming of like Brad Guzan for seasons now, and it's never happened.
Good. He was good at Sheffield United like 5 years ago, wasn't he? Like, am I wrong about this? I felt like he was
fine.
quite good.
He was fine.
Yeah.
And then he was good enough to think he could go back to Manchester United and maybe fight for the shirt there. Then he goes to Forest last season, and nobody likes him there, so they go and hire like the 50-year-old. I can't remember his name. Who immediately starts. I just think this. You think that Henderson has a high enough opinion of himself that he doesn't make the move to Palace unless he's getting guaranteed minutes. But I think this guy's kind of crazy. I think he's crazy, Josh.
Yeah, you feel like there must have been some assurance that he'd at least have like a real shot to do it. I mean, Johnstone did start game week 4, so it's hard to say. So I think, I mean, and Sanchez has to at least be considered, right? I mean, Chelsea have fairly, like pretty good defensive numbers, honestly, on the season so far. And they've got a nice run ahead. I mean, with goalkeepers, it doesn't matter so much the like immediate run because you're not planning to transfer them too much. So I think he'd be consideration. I don't know, Flecken. I think Flecken, the keeper for Brentford. I think that he has to be under consideration as well, just because it's like, should I just bank on Brentford being a team that I really just trust because I just like, that's like a well-run club with like a lot of good players. And it's like, should I, it's like, just put your faith. It's kind of like how we felt about Liverpool like 4 years ago, where it's like, well, they're just very, it's just assume it's going to work out. And maybe that's where I should be with Brentford. I'm like, they're so solid. They've had, they've kept, kind of this squad intact over the first 3 years in the Premier League. Assume that he'll be able to play well and keep clean sheets and kind of do what Raya did last year.
He's gotten at least a save point. He's gotten a save point in 3 out of 4 matches. So that's fine. He didn't get a save point in that battering of Fulham in game week 2. There were not many shots taken.
Yeah.
And he's got no game weeks where he's below 2 points, which is looking at the competition, kind of a miracle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only reason you'd see like, Neto at Bournemouth has more points than Flecken on the season. So what are we even talking about here? Well, anybody who's done that has gotten a pen save. That's right. Flecken's doing it it's hard graft on Flecken's part to get these fantasy points.
Yeah. I think it's just the reason I don't really want to go with the premium goalkeeper route, and you have Vicario at the top, he's at 5.1. I think that just put him just slightly into that premium. Don't know that I want him. And also I really want to have Udogie. So I don't know that I really want, Vicario. I don't necessarily, I'm not necessarily such a, well, also, I'm not sure I want to have 3 spots taken up, honestly, in the Spurs defense too. I think I could see myself having Madison and Son. If not now, at least at some point down the line. So
that's where Sanchez comes in, right? Because based on what we know of Chelsea, is you're not tripling up on outfield players there.
Probably won't be tripling up. So you have Areola, Leno. Those two are both above Allison and Ederson, right? Like arguably the 2 best keepers in the Premier League. And so that's why when it comes to fantasy goalkeepers, you're not necessarily looking at the quality of the team or even the number of clean sheets they keep. It's just about, are they the kind of defense that gets peppered with shots? And is the keeper going to be good enough to stop a bunch of them? And it's like, there's like a mental hurdle you have to get over. Like, am I going to be okay with them conceding goals in almost, most matches, but I will get like 4 points in every single one of them, or it's going to average out to 4 per match. Mm-hmm. And over a long enough, lens, you're also going to sneak in a couple of clean sheets. And those are the really important runs, right? Because that's what Raya was the specialist at last year, right? He'd have these kind of middling matches, but then it was like the matches where they kept a clean sheet, he'd often have 5 saves and he'd end up with 2 or 3 bonus points. And those are the ones that are huge, because if you have someone like Ederson, he's just rarely going to pick up enough saves, nor is the match going to be low scoring enough that the bonus points aren't going to get nicked by one of the midfielders or forwards, right? Or even another defender. It's very hard. The route to anything but clean sheet points for the best keepers is pretty tricky.
Yeah, you've got like Ederson's promises. At least he's making more passes than like Gundogan.
Yeah.
So maybe if it's a 0-0, Ederson gets his bonus that way through passes.
Sure.
And when you're splitting those hairs, you're in trouble. Just throw a dart, man.
All right. Well, that's a lot of wildcard talk. I think we've run through a bunch of different options without kind of committing ourselves too much. So my commitment to you, Brandon, is that I will try a solid draft just for fun. I will also have a draft of my wildcard available, and I will read it off at the very top of the podcast on the Patreon pod that we do on Thursday. So there's a little teaser for our Patreon supporters, or would-be Patreon supporters. You can support the pod at patreon.com/alwayscheating. Brendan, let's take one last break, and we'll talk a little bit about the game week right in front of us, game week 5. All right, Brendan, we're back. Just wanted to quickly give people a sense of what's happening this weekend, game week 5, directly in front of us. And there's a lot of wildcard talk, and everybody's thinking about wildcards. So no Friday for the first time this season, Brandon. We have no Friday match. You can tinker with your team up until dawn in the UK. I guess if you're in the UK, you can tinker until, I don't even know, 11 o'clock in the morning. But for people like you and me, Brendan, I do want to hopefully go to bed with the squad in place. And then I'll probably set an alarm for 5:55 for see if
you're not gonna wait for the Wolves leaks.
That's true. I guess it kind of depends on whether I plan to have anybody from Liverpool. I mean, if I was on the fence about Darwin, I probably would set an alarm for 5:55 a.m. just to see if there's any leaks about him starting.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, that does sound fun. So, I want to do that every week if I have Darwin. Just constantly stress about whether he actually is going to play. So we have Liverpool Wolves kick things off. In my memory, the first match after the international break is always like a 3-3 back and forth. I don't know. It's like nil with 3-3. There's no in between. So let's see what happens there. And then I think it's a fun. I think Man United Brighton is maybe the pick for Saturday. I think that's a really fun match. I think honestly, I see 3 matches on Saturday from like an entertainment standpoint that I think that should be really fun. Man United host Brighton, West Ham, Man City. I think could be fun. West Ham have started off really well this season. Shook off whatever Europa League stuff happened to them last year, and then Newcastle Brentford is the late game on Saturday, and that. I mean, Brentford could straight up win that match. That would not, given how Newcastle have started the season, that would not be shocking at all.
I agree. Yeah, these are all bangers, and then in all the ones that are too close to call, you've got Spurs hosting Sheffield United, and that's just like a pure fantasy pick. We're all going to be gunning for goals and assists for all our guys. Yeah. So Saturday is fully loaded. It's hopefully it is not a quintessential. We just got back from international break and forgot the codes to our lockers in the locker room sort of performance from these clubs.
It's at least one team will be that team. It's just hard to say going into the weekend. And then Sunday we've got Bournemouth host Chelsea in the early match. And like, who knows? I mean, we have not given nearly enough love to Dominic Solanke, who's had I think we finally did a couple pods ago, but Dominic Solanke's had a really nice start to the season. I have to admit, I'm still not really considering him for my squad, but credit to him. I mean, he has two goals and an assist on the season. He's kind of out there with the Forest striker, Awoniyi. Yeah, who's got 3 goals and an assist, has actually not gone a single game week so far this season without getting an attack in return. So, and they host Burnley too. I mean, I should at least consider him, I think, on my wild card. And we probably should have talked about him. I don't know what we couldn't go through every single player in all 20 teams, but he is definitely another player who you could definitely consider on a wild card. The problem is, if I go with that, am I going to go 3 through the middle? Then you can't play five across the middle and 3 up front. Somebody's got to go. There's just no way around
solid
it.
Draft. A1E comes into the solid draft, I think.
Yeah, that's true. Am I dropping Holland in that case? I don't know how that's gonna. I don't know.
No.
Well, I mean, the thing is, like, A1E costs as much as that's the thing about Alvarez, which makes it so crazy, is that Alvarez costs nothing, right? He's like, I think he's
6.5.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's gone up a little bit, right? But not even that much. Was it? He's at 6.7 maybe? Yeah, 6.7, which nothing. So then we have Everton Arsenal. Should be an interesting match, I guess. Just because, like, what's going on with Everton, Brandon? I was such a Sean Dyche. I was kind of in the bag for him, and now I'm not sure. I don't know what's going on anymore.
Well, there's just something rotten there at the moment. I don't know enough about the club to say it's the ownership. Something's wrong with the toilets, or who knows. Yeah. But you've got players like, when you see Damari Gray and Iwobi just fleeing in the transfer window. Yeah. And just like not impressive players coming in to replace them. I mean, maybe they'll come good, but it just seems like our club that's in complete disarray, and nobody's really willing to. What do you
think about Iwobi going to Fulham? Like it's kind of strange.
It's a little bit. It's a strange one. I mean, when Willian went to Fulham last season, I was like, well, this is a cash grab, and Fulham are kind of stupid for doing this. Yeah. But then Willian just like played some of his best football in 3 seasons.
Yeah, he was awesome.
So it was really great. I think Fulham does offer that for players who are really willing to do that, and we need a little bit more depth on the wing. So I'm fine with it. I'd rather have signed Iwobi than Raul Jimenez.
No, I think that makes sense. At least Iwobi's got like he has incredible speed, if nothing else, right? He's that pace can really be valuable in certain matches. So, and then Monday we have Forest hosting Burnley. So there you go. A1E can shine once. Honestly, you have to expect him to do something in that match, right? Given what he's done so far. I think it's kind of interesting, by the way, that because they didn't play, I just popped over and looked at the table real quick. Because they didn't play that match, Luton Town and Burnley are the only teams on 0 points. And it's kind of, they have to, they do like the last 5 fixtures, but for them it's just 3. They both just have identical 3 losses on the season. So it's really, really tough start for those two.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Sooner will change.
Yeah, something's got to give. I know it's crazy that Forest is just like it seems fine. Like they've got 2 wins already. Like they're probably just gonna be fine this year. And I kind of like it. I'm into they have turned out to be a good addition to the Premier League. I really thought they might just be like a 1 up, 1 down because they bought so many players last year. But I have enjoyed Forest. They are not boring. There's always something weird happening there. Our Aurier is now like playing as a right wing. Like, okay, great. Like let's somehow it's all working. So
he said, Chilwell, hold my beer. I would like there to be a little bit more identity with Forest style of football. But that will come with time. Yeah. They're doing a bang up job, just like hanging on for dear life, and that's what you got to do in their position. And over time, they can sort of build that identity back.
Yeah. All right. Well, exactly. Yeah. Give them like 3 years, and I mean, we sort of remember like Wolves did this, or it was like, oh, like how is this going to work with all these Portuguese players? And for a couple of years, it really did. All right. Well, that's what's happening in Game Week 5. I think from fantasy perspective, I don't see any reason not to captain Holland. I guess that would be the big one. I'm on a wild card. You talked about your transfers being used probably on a Man United midfielder for Madison. Is that right?
Yeah, Madison definitely coming in for who, and the Alvarez thing coming in for Jackson or Watkins. it just feels kind of marginal to me. Am I just going to roll 2 free transfers for the entire season? I think what I may do instead of a move up front is actually bring in, do one midfielder for Madison and then fix an issue with Pau Torres and bring in a defender who I'd be willing to start in game week 5 so I could potentially bench Estupiñán depending on what happens with Ecuador on Tuesday. So I'm expecting to use both my free transfers likely in the defense and midfield right now. And I'm with you. Captain Holland didn't get a minute for Norway in their first match. So he seems to be just like staying fit, staying healthy. Good for him. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like he's the Terminator. What can you say? So, all right. Well, that's the pod. Once again, if you want to support the pod, and I'll talk more about my wild card on Thursday, you can go to patreon.com/always. It would be funny if I didn't actually wild card in the end, but no, I'm definitely going to. You can go to patreon.com/always. It's crazy that I haven't activated. That's the thing. It's crazy. Go to patreon.com, but I just had to I could not step
You're gonna
foot
get
into
through
that
URL at some point.
Yeah, exactly. I did before the pod today. I've been following what's happening. I just could not correct that website. I was just feeling too down. All right. So go to patreon.com/always cheating, support the pod, get access to our Discord, et cetera, et cetera. Brendan, you want to thank our producer patrons?
Sure. Big thanks to producers Mike DePietro, Trevor Ingerson, our buddy Chris Howell, Babas Kuhn, James Holland, Dave Wegner Lodahl, Nick Wright, Lazaros Llanos, Jesse Halstead, Bruce Kerr, Brian Chin, Blair Jacobson, Todd Byerly, Andy Portlock at FPL Merch, Carrie Swanson, Jefferson Turner, Buffalo Wild Mings, Francis Moore, Sam Shower, Caleb Robbie, Valgar Paulson Kruger, Alex Holcomb, James Keatley, The Saint, Bob Fox, Craig Jackson, Shalin F. Kadakia, Terrence O'Donnell, Paul Herzig, Keith Cram, Thomas Tislov, Noah and Louise, Travis Grant, Julio Pena, Linus Vennerstrom, Dan Parsons, James C., Matthew Skinner, Frode Jacobson, Brennan, Daniel Hart, and Lolly. Rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us wherever you get your social media. For all this information and more, pay a visit to our website, alwayscheating.com, where Always Cheating pint glasses are now for sale. Once exclusive to our Patreon supporters, you can now spend your, if you could translate your FPL bucks to real bucks, that would be cool, but you can't. So if you have real currency and you want to share a pint with the cheaters, you can do so there. Thank you for listening. Josh, I cannot wait to see what your wild card looks like come Thursday.
Same here. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.